Hello, and welcome back to the Pick Joy podcast. I am Sabine, and today's conversation is about something we believe we understand, but most of us were never actually taught. I'm talking about self love. However, not the Instagram version, not the bubble bath, and not the affirmations over pretty music. Real self love, the kind that shows up in how we treat our bodies, our boundaries, and our desires, because something shifts in our 40s and 50s. You're no longer trying to live to prove yourself, and you're no longer living to reproduce either. And you're not building your life around everyone else's anymore. This is the season where a woman starts asking, who am I now? And what actually feels good to me? And today's guest, Venus O'Hara, has created something called the 8 Pillars of Self-Love. And one of those pillars is self-pleasure. And we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about what it means to feel at home in your body without being it for somebody else. We don't talk about pleasure as alignment. And we don't talk about sensuality that isn't performance. So this conversation is honest, it's a little edgy, and it's necessary. Venus, I am so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. A real pleasure.
Yeah.
Literally.
So for anyone meeting you for the first time, how do you usually introduce yourself today?
I say I'm a holistic self-love content creator. I've been specialized in female sexuality for many years, but I also have other interests such as meditation, healthy living, eating, etc. So I use the umbrella term holistic self-love because that really defines everything that I do and everything that I'm about. And my mission is to help women, especially, to prioritize pleasure and peace.
I love that. So what would you say people mainly misunderstand about self-love? What's the biggest problem?
It's like you said in the intro. It's exactly that. It's not just about, bubble baths I mean, that is part of it, but I think it's deeper. And I think it's about how you show up for yourself. And in the 8 pillars, there are other things like self-respect, your boundaries, and self-compassion as well. That's another one that's quite low for most people. Most people are more compassionate with other people, and especially women. We're always kind of outsourcing our energy towards other people. And that's how we're taught. We're not really self-sourcing our self-love or self-pleasure.
So give me a brief rundown on what the actual 8 pillars are, so we kind of get an overview before we dive into self-pleasure later
Let's see
on.
if I remember them.
Sorry.
So I've been coaching people on this for a very long, for about 2 years now, and it's so interesting because I usually start off with the lowest ones, the ones which are hardest for most people, and the lowest one is always self-compassion, because we know we can do better, so we're not holding ourselves at where we're at, we always kind of want to push ourselves more. And then it's self-acceptance. That's kind of a precursor of self-love. You have to accept who you are, where you're at, and all of that. And then self-respect is a big one. That's boundaries. Self-care, which would be the bubble baths and eating well, things like that. Self-confidence, how you show up, how you walk, how you speak. Self-expression, self-growth, and then self-pleasure. I think that's the 8. I can check if you want.
Sounds pretty complete to me.
Yeah.
Would you say that self-love is a feeling or a practice?
For me, I'm presenting this as a practice. I think self-love is the practice. I think the results are, self-worth, self-esteem, but I think self-love is a practice. And then hopefully through the practice, you get to a point where you are just loving yourself, and it's a state. That's the goal.
Yeah. So, as I said a little bit earlier, from my own experience, I know that things change in midlife, like when we're in our 40s and definitely in our 50s. And like I said, we're no longer proving or reproducing, so that's fallen by the wayside. And then um, I feel like for most of our lives, our bodies were very functional. And for myself, I want to say it's now much more intentional. And tell me a little bit from your point of view, how does self-love evolve in, let's say, your 40s and 50s?
From what I've seen from the women I've coached and around me in retreats that I've been to, I remember the first time I ever went to a retreat and there were 11 women, and it was a Christmas retreat. And I was thinking, who goes to a retreat at Christmas? And it turned out that many of these women were in their 40s and 50s, and it was their first Christmas without their kids because they just got divorced or separated. So they'd spent 20 years outsourcing all the love, and then they're like, oh, who am I? And when I told them what I did for a living, so my specialty is female sexuality, they were kind of like, oh, what's that? It's like they'd forgotten to tap into themselves. And I think also with through marriage and childbearing years, I think your body, you have to kind of disconnect from your body. Having all these doctors poking you, prodding you, and all of this. You've got all these different procedures you have to do during pregnancy, childbirth, and beyond the pelvic floor, etc. And then in a marriage, this is very reductive what I'm going to say, that your vagina is almost like if you don't allow your husband to use it, they could end up with the secretary. That's a very simplistic term of it. So I think sometimes it's her body's not for herself in those circumstances. So that's what a lot of these women that I met told me. And then when I introduced them to pleasure products, it was like a seed was planted in their minds, and it was just like a reclamation of their bodies and something that they'd never even thought of earlier in life, because it's a very taboo topic to speak of pleasure. Things are changing a lot now. I mean, now you can go to a hardware store or even a department store and you can find pleasure products. They're not as cloak and dagger or hidden as they used to be. So everything's changing now. And I really think that I want to encourage women to prioritize their pleasure.
Yeah, I would also, I don't know, for me, I feel like we didn't have any role models for that. Like,
Mm.
this was never a conversation I would have had with my mother. And I honestly don't think she ever like enjoyed any of that. It's like I feel like we're the first generation where this is less taboo, and something that's much more like it's happening actually. And but there's no role models and there's no conversations that we had. Like I said, that we were never taught any of this.
Yeah, it's true. And also, I think education is all about, reproduction, where the babies come from. That's the focus of sex education. It's a very small part of a curriculum when it's available. And, the clitoris and all the stuff about pleasure is just not part of the conversation. And also, when we look at adult movies and stuff, that's not really part of it either. It's more serving the man and stuff. So it's not really about being the center of your own pleasure. And I think that's what I want to promote in my content. And I've seen so many transformations around me. I mean, I've coached so many women, especially women who've never had an orgasm, and I tell them what to do. I give them these protocols, and I ask them, "Have you tried it? Have you tried it?" And no, no, no. The one day comes, oh my God, and then they walk differently, they speak differently, they show up differently. So I think being connected to your pleasure and owning your pleasure really has a powerful impact. It's not just for those moments of pleasure, it has a huge effect on other areas of your life. And it does affect the other pillars of the self-love, such as your confidence, how you express yourself, etc. I think it's very profound. And also it kind of changes your perception of, I would say, your emotional decisions as well. I think many women have experiences where they've had an incredible intimate connection with someone who has ended up being very toxic emotionally. And that toxicity can keep you into this passionate loop where you're going back to someone who, is giving you this intense makeup sex. And then, but they're bad for you. And I think there's a lot of that happening. That's kind of the reason why I started to explore self pleasure, because I had this pattern in my life and I thought I can't keep repeating this. So I became self sufficient, and that helped me to make better decisions. So I think sometimes, like going on, let's say, dating apps and things like that, it can be almost like drunkenness, that your vision is clouded by loneliness. Is similar to drunkenness in the sense that you're not making the best decisions. You're not coming from a place of fulfillment. It's trying to scratch some itch that you can actually scratch yourself, to put it in basic terms.
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes both ways. It's like I have been in toxic relationships where the sex was amazing and I stayed way too long, because I didn't want to give that up. But then there were also like in general, I think relationships where it's not that great, but at least it's something. And I think there is this belief where women think if they leave their partner in their 40s or in their 50s, like, oh my God, this is it. Like, what if I never have sex again? And I think that part of, well, I don't want to say you don't need anybody else for that, but it's not that black and white. It's not like you're either with somebody or you're not, and you will never experience pleasure again. So there is this gray area which is deserves to be talked about.
But I think in that gray area, you have to come to a place where you are self-sourcing your self-esteem, and that's so important, to get to a place where in the other pillars, like the self-respect, the boundaries, knowing what you deserve and knowing that you deserve better. I think that's something that's really, really powerful. And it's also my own journey in life. So I'm doing a lot of work about this myself, to try and because then you get to a point when you really work on your self-love and your self-esteem, that type of relationship will not be fulfilling to you, because all of this other stuff that happens outside the bedroom is going to make you not aroused. So we have to kind of change that, change what we are accepting and change what we think is acceptable. And I think through doing this practice of the self-love, the 8 pillars of self-love, that's one way to do that. And something I did a few years ago, actually, I got this very cheap like diary like this, and I used to write 3 acts of self-love that I did every day for myself. And it was a really cool practice, just to kind of think, yeah, I'm prioritizing myself. And you have to be your own gatekeeper. So what you're accepting, you're choosing, and we have to be responsible for that as well.
And that's why I thought you and I were very much in alignment with the work that we do, because picking joy is about making these micro choices intentionally every single day for ourselves in all areas of our lives. And when it comes to self-love and self-pleasure, that's definitely an important part of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's I think it's super, super important. And also, I think a lot of women, or even anyone, kind of it's easy to get escapism through, or express escapism through work, and get work, become a workaholic, because I think when the correlation between effort and results is more controllable through work. But in relationships, it's a complete minefield. But I've kind of made it my duty now, or to actually become a student of love. I've really been reading a lot of books about relationships, about conflict, about love in general, just to try and learn, because I think it's the most interesting part of personal development. I mean, something I saw on Instagram once, it was talking about, I saw a reel of someone talking about different healing modalities and different therapies, etc. And they said you can do plant medicine, you can do meditation, you can do la la la, but a relationship is going to, shed light on all of your triggers, and you cannot schedule them. It's not Thursday at 3:00 you see your therapist. All these things are popping up at any time, but you have an incentive and a reward to actually make peace with that person again. So, and I think that's really powerful, especially if the other person is not a toxic person, but they can, work with you, and they are also committed to growth, the growth of the relationship. So I think that's possible. And I think when you work on your own self-concept and knowing what you deserve, everything will improve. I think we have to become better gatekeepers of what we are accepting in our lives.
So along those lines, what would you say, what does being sexually aligned, what does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, it always depends. Can depend on someone else as well. So it's not easy. It's not
Mm.
easy because sometimes you can have ambitions and then your reality might not reflect that back to you. But I think with midlife, I would say the starting point would be sensuality. And to start with, I think you can reconnect with your body in other ways, such as just having a massage or going to the sea and putting your feet in the ocean, things like that. So I would say that would be a starting point of this reclamation or of pleasure. So, because and then I think for myself, my definition of sex has expanded so much because I'm also writing about it. I'm making content about it. So it's just huge. It's not just about those moments if I'm with someone, but something I've been thinking about lately is my relationship to myself, and I think it's a good idea to write a letter to your vulva, to your yoni, and just express love and maybe ask for forgiveness. But I think sorry for all those terrible guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to choose better. But sometimes we can make decisions based on who's available rather than who we desire. Does that make sense? Because sometimes I think if you are, let's imagine your body's really, you're really on fire, and then you go on a dating app and you think, okay, I mean, sometimes we're making choices on who's available and willing, and not who's really good for us, and not who we really desire. So I think that's tricky, and that's not something I have dominated at all. It's really hard.
Yeah, it's the fear of what if this is it, and
Mm,
then making choices from that space and settling
mm,
for something that we wouldn't settle for if it weren't out of fear.
mm,
Um, and yeah, that whole journey, and I'm kind of going through that right now after, a breakup after many years, and to getting to this place where you feel whole again, where you don't need to make choices from that place of fear, where, like, but it's very difficult because there's a lot of noise out there coming at you where they're like, oh my God, you're in your 50s. Like, this is really scary. Actually, it's not. When
mm,
you feel whole and feel really happy where you're at and with what you're doing, and um, there's this peace that settles in and contentment. And when you start making choices from that place, they look very
mm.
different than from a place of fear.
But I think also it's good to get into the mindset of opening up to new um, social activities.
Mm.
I think that's a really good thing to do for your brain, and just it helps with your openness. Because I think there's a big, danger of just blaming the dating pool or blaming circumstance when we are, in control of ourselves at least. And also think about what you're offering, as well, rather than they're. There's a lot of blame there's lots of blaming in dating, but I think it's something that's really positive is to start opening up your social circles. And I use an app here in Barcelona called Meetup.
Mhm.
It's not a dating app. It's just a kind of cultural events, etc. And on that or similar, you will find lots of groups of the interest that you have. Let's say if you like nature, hiking groups, reading groups, book clubs. There's just so much. And if you start saying yes to things and going out more, I think eventually you will be around the types of people who
Mhm.
you will be compatible with. I've never been on a dating app. I did a dating app once, but that's not my way of meeting people. I think it's super awkward. I haven't met a single person who enjoys dating apps at all. And I think people just do it because that's how people are meeting people these days.
Yeah.
But it's just super awkward. And I think also those people that you meet in those contexts, if you met them in a different context, they could be very different.
Hmm.
You know, I think of the people that I've been attracted to or fell in love with in my life, I would not have swiped them on any app. It has been something that's been a gradual build up. So I do think that we need to prioritize our downtime. You know, not just fill our waking hours with work
Hmm.
things all the time. So I think having that priority of, you know, doing something nice for yourself in terms of expanding the sensuality of going to a spa, going to try different massages, or even working out, something that's very body centric. It's going to make you feel so much better in your body anyway. And then also the social aspect. What lights you up? You know, what hobbies do you have? Because when you find someone who does want to get up on a Sunday and do a hike with you, that can be really enriching. Or reading the same books as you. You know,
Hmm.
those are some of my hobbies, but other people have other hobbies. And I think also it's really important to honor your weird. Like whoever you are, whatever you think is quirky or weird about you, it's going to be perfect for the right person. Don't try to be normal. You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's almost like putting yourself into the natural habitat of the people that you align with to have the
Yeah.
same interests, the same hobbies. So put yourself into that habitat, into that environment already, and you already have things in common with those people.
Mm.
Um, so maybe give us a few more examples on how women can reclaim their sensuality without a partner. What are the give us some little nuggets about that because nobody's ever really taught us, right? How to enjoy ourselves and our bodies without it being for someone else. So this is a
Yeah.
whole new, there's no expectations, there's no children, there's no reproduction, there's nothing. So you're like in a whole new world. And how do you reclaim that? Give us a little something.
Well, if you've got a bathtub, I think a lot of people in the US do have a bathtub. That's a great thing, you know. Have a solo date, you know, with yourself, and you know have a sensual bath with essential oils and candles and nice music, and really celebrate your body. I mean, if you live alone, I think it's good to be naked as much as possible. I think it's really nice to have the breeze against you and just get used to seeing yourself naked in the mirror because that's going to help with your confidence when you do find someone or you do have sex. So I think nakedness helps a lot. I always sleep naked as much, you know, try and have that ritual at home. But something I think is super exciting is this concept of self seduction. Because sometimes, you know, I'm a specialist in sex toys. I've reviewed over 1,000. I've designed dozens, and often when we, you know, use sex toys, it's basically toy to genitals, and that's it. But there are other things you can do. There are things now called audio erotica. That's something that's getting very big now. So that's really aligned with the female sexuality, which is a lot of the time we like to expand our imaginations. So there are many apps that have audio erotica, some stories, or even something called guided masturbations, which are just incredible. So these are, for example, practices where you're listening to a story, and the voice or the narrator is telling you where to touch yourself and how. I remember I did one once, and they said to kind of like caress around the breast area, not without grabbing it. And I was like, wow. Why don't I do this more often? Or why don't you just touch with behind your wrist? You know, we don't do this to ourselves enough. So that was a really interesting practice to kind of just start, you know, touching yourself in a way that's like a sensual massage. And also going back to the bath thing, I think it's really nice to have things like coconut oil or even essential oils and really kind of really massage your body and, you know, love your skin, hug yourself, have those little rituals. And it could be something you do before bed and then have nice clean sheets, and then you're going to have a really nice sleep. So just really exploring the sensuality first and foremost, and then I would say these audio erotica there's a lot of apps. If you look for Audioerotica, you'll find lots of stuff. So those are stories and guided practices, but also sex toys. And there's a technology that was invented around 10 years ago that uses air. I don't know if you are
Mm.
familiar with this, but
I,
these air stimulators.
I saw some
Um,
ads on Instagram the other day. I was like, oh my
for
God.
this, maybe. There's,
Yes, exactly, the lemon.
there's a lemon that's gone viral. There's one selling every 35 seconds, apparently. So
Wow.
this
Is
is
it like
incredible.
$89 or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's incredible because it's just using air, and it's just a very powerful sensation because vibration, and a lot of people maybe in later life have issues with maybe arthritis or holding
Mm.
something for a long time. So there's no kind of residual feeling when you're holding this. It's only the sensation here. And also other things like wand massages, those big kind of massages to massage the body. They can be used on the clitoris as well. They're kind of things to wake up the senses. So I think it's really good to invest in some
Mm-hmm.
pleasure technology, because that can be really life changing. Because sometimes, I mean, a sex toy doesn't replace a person because these are really focused on the sensation, and you decide like, how long, the pressure,
Yeah.
and with a person you can't be like, okay, stronger. It's not as sometimes not as efficient. It's more the emotional charge that's kind of getting you to those higher states, usually. So that's a kind of good place to start to kind of connect with your body. So I think there's a whole thing there with the sensuality of the baths, being naked, just the and also reading hot books. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things, and also series on Netflix. There's so many things now that are educational. I mean, there's a series I really love called I think it's called Love, Sex, and Goop or something.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's a really good series. And if you just put sex into Netflix, you'll find all of the hot series. Another one I love is one called Sex Life, which is actually based on a true story, and it's from the female gaze as well, which is so there's lots of like things that can titillate you and expand your imagination. I think through books, Netflix, and then toys, and then just in investing in nice coconut oil and then having massages as well. And when you go out, and then having an active social
Yeah.
life. Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah.
I also think caring for your body is really important as well, like eating well and moving. Because at the end of the day, sex is a physical act, and also being naked, you're going to feel better when you disrobe in front of someone if you are normally or frequently naked, and just connecting with your body a lot. Lots
I
of
love
homework
that.
there.
Yeah. It's a lot of ideas that are a little bit outside of the box and things you wouldn't do if you were in a relationship, maybe. I think, would you say it's harder, well, depending on the partner that you have, I guess, to introduce these things, but it could be very exciting um, if you've never done any of this and then you're newly single or divorced and you start exploring this and getting creative. It's a very exciting journey, actually.
I know so many women who've had their awakenings in midlife. I mean, so profound that they've ended up working in the sex positive space. So for me, I think it's really positive to have role models and see examples of the thing that you want in your life. Because when you don't have that, then you think it doesn't exist, but it absolutely does. And there's actually a trend now in Hollywood of the older woman and the younger guy.
Hmm.
You know, so this is a really big trend now that we're seeing in films, in series, and so I don't think you should feel old because I think that's a mistake to think because the wisdom you have, and I think you must honor who you are to the fullest. And I remember once I was with a friend of mine who I thought he was a very good friend, and he was like inner circle friend. And like, we used to meet every Friday for confessions, and we used to share all the gossip. And at the time, I was seeing someone who was not good for me. There's a bit of a pattern here, and I was telling him that, you know, for me, when I have 1,000 sex toys in my spare room, you know, it's not easy to meet a guy who's okay with that. That everyone's like, oh yeah, that's cool, and then until it's not cool. So, so, so I told him, oh yeah, with my, because also at the time I was working on local media because I live in Barcelona, but I was quite recognizable in the street, so I didn't feel safe going on apps and things like that. So I was seeing someone who's also in the media, and he was just a not good guy for me. And I was telling a friend about it, and then he said, "Well, maybe you shouldn't tell people what you do until like third date." And I said, "I don't have a terminal disease. You know, it's not like I've got something to tell you. By the way, because that would be like me saying that what I do is not good, or I'm ashamed of it, which I'm not at all." And then at the time, I had a friend who was this gothic woman, and she's just like all full of tattoos and stuff. And then she is with a guy who's all full of tattoos, and he's a mentalist. He does like a lot of like hypnotherapy on the TV and stuff. And they got married all in black latex, and their wedding cake was like a high heel. So they really honored who they are. And imagine if those people had pretended to be normal or mainstream, they would have never found each other.
Right.
Because I mean, those are the couples who inspire me. The couples who are really, they really met their match, you know? So just knowing that exists, it's like, no, I have to honor who I am, and that's the most important thing.
And if you start off a relationship by overfunctioning, trying to
Mm-hmm.
protect them because they might not be okay with that, I mean, where's that going to take you? I mean, to resentment for sure.
And you're
Uh,
not even being true to yourself. They don't even know who you
right.
are because you're not being real. So,
Yeah. So, no, no,
mm,
no. Um, I talk about joy a lot. I mean, my brand is Pick Joy. And a lot of people assume I mean the fun stuff. Like we said, the
mm,
bubble baths or the champagne or going out and partying. But joy, like my joy, isn't about escapism or like as a coping mechanism. Joy to me is ownership. Joy is not about abandoning yourself or your body or outsourcing pleasure to somebody else and hoping it's going to be met or shrinking your desires to be digestible for others, like we just talked
mm,
about. Joy really is about inhibiting yourself fully. And what we're talking about here feels much closer to that. So if your version of joy requires you to leave your body, it's not joy. It's a distraction. And I see a lot of that right now with single friends I have, like in their late 40s and their 50s, who like go out and like party like crazy. And it's almost like they're trying to turn back time and like find themselves again in their 20s. And
mm,
yeah, and it's not true really to who they are. And if I look at the rest of their lives, like this doesn't align. Like, who are you if you're doing this, but on the other hand, you're doing something completely different? So, if it requires you to leave your body and override your body or override the things that make you happy, it's not my kind of joy. It's really a distraction. So I just wanted to clarify that because I've been getting a lot of messages and about like what people understand what joy is and how to pick joy, but it's none of those things. I mean, there's a time and place for all of it. I like to have fun. I like to go out and
mm,
but that's not the kind of joy that's going to change your life.
mm,
That's it's a lot of fleeting joy, the shopping sprees and drinking too much and partying. That's very fleeting. It's just for the moment. But what we are talking about here is something that's sustainable and that's gonna last. So if somebody listening to this realizes that self-pleasure or self-expression even is their lowest pillar, like
mm.
on the priority list on the bottom, what is give me a few more micro steps that they can take this week without investing heavily into anything, but what can they do to turn this around and to yeah, to choose differently for themselves.
I think it's self-inquiry. And I think something that I really love is journaling. I think you can get so much from journaling with the right prompts. And I think the joy when I heard you speak, I was thinking of the word fulfillment, because I think fulfillment is a sustainable goal. And it came to mind when I go to a private members club, and when it's Friday, there's this after work thing, and everyone's like, oh yeah, I deserve this wine now, I deserve this drink now. And it's like escapism. But my goal is to create a life that I don't drink and I don't need to have that, because my Monday to Friday is amazing, you know? Friday's just another day, you know? So I think that's the goal. And I think a journaling inquiry with like, what do I need more of to feel more fulfillment, or what areas of my life are not working? That's something I really like about coaching, is the life wheel. There's if you look up, if you Google life wheel, for example, you'll find different examples. Basically, it's a circle, and it can be divided into 8 or 12 parts depending on which coaching modality it is. And those parts could be, for example, family or relationships or finance or fitness. And then you can score each part of your life and see what the current situation is. Then you'll see visually which areas are lacking. And then you can kind of like make some plan for yourself about how to improve those areas. And I think that's really important. It also helps to have a friend or confidant on a similar journey to you, so an accountability partner. I think that really helps a lot, because sometimes it can be your friends who are taking you down the bad path. Because sometimes it's interesting when you make a decision like giving up alcohol or giving up tobacco, you'll see who your real friends are. Because when you're no longer the party friend, others will feel judged, and it can be very lonely. Picking joy can be very lonely, but maybe you need to find a new tribe as well. If you have friends who are keeping you in that self-destruction mode. So I think I think self-inquiry is the first thing, and where do you want to be, and what would bring you more fulfillment in your life. I think that's important, and what's draining you, because I think if we tap into the body, and you think about what's expanding you, and what's making you feel smaller. And something I did recently, I did a somatic healing session with a person a somatic body worker. I've never done this before, but I've done a lot of different healing and therapy modalities, and it was basically like talk therapy, but with massage. And it was fantastic, because when I was speaking about an emotional challenge that I had, she said to me, when you speak about this person, your body's contracting. So it's like tapping into those things, like what's present in your life and how is it making you feel? Are you expanding and full of joy, or is it full of dread? So it's trying to do a bit of an audit on your current life, and then just tapping into those things that do bring you joy. If joy is nature, then join a hiking group. There's lots of ways to think about what brings you joy. Going to a nice restaurant once a week, or something I did a few years ago, which was really cool, is I created a self-love bank account, which is just so cool. I made a self-love budget for myself, and that money's just for holidays, clothes, restaurants. It's just nice. Or massages as well. And I got really curious. I'm going to try a different massage every month. So, because people are spending lots of money on alcohol, so why not? People have a self-destruction budget, but not a self-love budget. Doesn't make
I like
sense.
that.
Yeah. So start a joy budget.
I know what you said about it gets lonely. I mean, I completely stopped drinking alcohol, and then I left my relationship, and all of a sudden it felt like everything came to a screeching halt, and it did get very lonely. But I know from experience, because I've like started over a few times in my life, that this is kind of the space where you're in between things, and that this is a state that doesn't last. So it might seem scary to people to say, I'm going to start over and I'm going to make all these changes in my life. People are going to fall by the wayside potentially. Yeah, they do, but it's temporary. And like you said, there's things that we can do to make our life full again in a very aligned way. There's something Jane Fonda says a lot, and I've seen it in multiple interviews with her, where she said, I guess when she was like 60, and she was like, oh my God, I have, I don't know, 20, 30 years left. Like, what am I going to do with this? And she sat down and she wrote down the woman she wants to be, um, how she wants to feel. And then she reversed engineered that, like you said, like think about what you enjoy doing. If it's nature, then join a hiking club. It's the same
Mm.
concept, like think about who you want to be, how you want to feel, and then what does that require? Like reverse engineer it. And then you have your answers of what you need to focus on in order to make your life full in a more aligned way.
Absolutely. And there's if I think meditation is a great thing to do. Not everyone is a meditator, but I think it's a great way to start with self-inquiry. But another thing to do is in a book called "Lead the Field" by Earl Nightingale. He's a contemporary of Napoleon Hill, so it's a long time. It's an old book, but he talks about doing something called thinking time. So you can have a time, you can do it every day or once a week, where you just think through a problem, and you could just think through a question of what would make me happier, what would make me more fulfilled, and just sit in silence. Maybe have a notepad when the ideas start coming to you. But I actually came up with my own framework of how I want to feel, because that's the thing. Because life's not just all fulfillment. It's not just about the events. It's about how you feel in response to them. And I've decided that I want to feel ace, aliveness, comfort, expansion. So that for me is aliveness can mean so many things. It could be sex, it could be an orgasm, it could be a holiday. Travel gives me aliveness, something that's kind of giving me excitement, something that's kind of stimulating me on some level. And then comfort is, that groundedness, safety. Safety is super important. And expansion is about growth. And this could apply to the friends in your life, are they giving you aliveness, comfort, and expansion? And I realized this with a friend of mine. I realized this person doesn't keep my secrets. They repeat things, and they're quite reckless. And I was like, they're not giving me the comfort. I'm not feeling expanded, So it's kind of a good to make your own blueprint up about how you want to feel and what makes you feel joyful,
Yeah.
and try and just do an audit of all the things in your life. And then sometimes we cannot completely eliminate something or someone from our lives, but we can kind of shadow ban them or kind of reduce their presence in our lives without guilt.
Yeah.
That's really important, because some people do drain us, And I think we have to be kind of ruthless sometimes with how we're protecting our peace, which is really important.
There is a narrative out there which is kind of scary when it comes to your 40s and 50s or even 60s, where, and I've been getting that a lot lately, where people, when you tell them, oh, I'm single again, they look at you and they go, oh, I'm so sorry. Poor you. Or they assume, they're like, oh wow, you must be like dating like crazy out there. But and that's one of the reasons why we're talking about this, because the truth is actually much quieter and much deeper than that. Because being single doesn't mean you shut down, especially not in this age. Because you have all the freedom in the world. You don't have little kids that tie you down. You don't have to listen to anybody anymore. You're financially, I assume, independent. You have your own job. And it also doesn't mean you're desexualized at this point and you're all done and finished. Um, there's this beautiful opportunity that I see in my own life, and that's why I thought it was really important to talk to you, because we have the opportunity to reclaim our bodies, our sensuality, our pleasure. And that doesn't mean like I am trying to prove independence or being single. No, I love being with people, but I also know that we can't base our choices, our decisions on fear of being single at this point in our lives. I just think there's something really beautiful about coming back into our own bodies, even with or without a partner.
Mm.
If you had to give me a definition, you're the expert, of what does wholeness feel like in your body? What can you expect? What does it feel like?
I think it's having that sensation that there's something to look forward to and you're not really sure what it is. And I would say that's aliveness. Sometimes you have that feeling you're like, oh, I'm excited and I don't really know why. That's just really cool. And there's just a lot, or even maybe you do have a lot of things to look forward to. Having something to look forward to is really important, I think, just to kind of have that, tap into that aliveness. But I think expansion is really important as well, like how you're walking and also how you're dressing and how you're like showing up. I mean, I think, some days when I don't, a lot of days I don't even wear makeup and I'm just wearing like a hoodie and a sweatpants. And those days I'm kind of like, don't look at me. And I kind of go out in the street and I think, I hope no one recognizes me. you know, those are the days where I just don't want to be seen. But other days I'm like, okay, heels on and like makeup and I'm making an effort. I think it does help you psychologically to think about your appearance, not in a way that's, too exaggerated, but just a way that choosing clothes that make you feel confident, colors that make you feel confident, and having that. Why not every day? So I think that's a great thing to do. Is really think about what's going to make you stand taller.
Hold your head
Yeah,
up high.
yeah.
And there's something about that I've been feeling. There's this, when you get through the initial part of this and you come back out and you start to see the light on the other side, there's like this glow that you start to feel to come up in yourself, which I can tell is magnetic.
Mm.
And like when you do go outside and like the simplest places, whether it's the supermarket or it's the UPS store I went to the other day, it's like you can tune in and out of that. And when you turn your light on and um, put it out there, the conversations that come back are very different than when you're just in your sweatpants and the hoodie over and you're like hoping nobody's gonna see you.
Yeah.
So, and there's this, yeah, magnetism. Like that's the word, that what it feels like to me, that you put out there and it attracts actually the same. And that's really like it's been really interesting for me to experience that, to like really consciously experience that.
Yeah, and I think about, have as many joyful exchanges in the day that you can possibly have. And, eye contact, smile, thank you, please, thank you. And, be really kind of cordial with everyone that you encounter on your path every day. I think that can really, really help. Because I'm quite good at that, actually. And sometimes I walk into, let's say, a bakery and the person who's known me, that I can see the reaction is like, oh, yeah, it's her. And that's just nice to have that, to be perceived in that way. I think. So I think that's like it's a very simple thing you can do, but I think it definitely helps your magnetism muscle, develop it just by being pleasant to deal with. And being pleasant to deal with just helps you in so many areas of life, even in work. If you're pleasant to deal with, you'll get repeat customers or clients, whatever. So I think that's a lot. And then you kind of magnetize joy, and then the joy is going to come back. It's compounding joy.
Yeah, and you feel better about yourself. Not in a moral kind of a way, but like for me, it's even when I take the dog out. I live in an
Mm.
apartment building and I take the dog out and I like soften up, and the people that I see walking their dogs, and you strike up a little conversation with them, and it like when I come back after a short little walk like that and I come back inside and I continue working, I feel very different than when I'm trying to like be shut down and avoid humanity
Mm.
altogether.
I think there's a time for that, though. There's a time for the
Yes.
kind of just, and I think it's just about tapping into your body and just in self-inquiry and just getting to know yourself. Because sometimes you do need to charge your social batteries
Yes.
and be alone And that's the biggest test of how adjusted you are, is how comfortable you are alone. Not on social media, not just scrolling on your phone, but just sitting in silence as
Mhm.
well. I mean, I was surprised. I heard sometimes when I hear people don't go to restaurants alone or don't go. I just do that all the time. I think it's really positive to do that. And also, there's a great book I love called The Artist's Way
Oh,
by
yes.
Julia Cameron, and she talks about an artist date every week. I think, why not have a joy date every week with yourself and do something alone, just to try and do something different. And also for the neural pathways of your brain, just to, just try new things all the time. I think that can really open up your field to new things and newness rather than expecting the same old, same
Yeah.
old. So many things you can do.
And I agree with you. This is not about having distraction and constantly being out there. There definitely is a time and place for everything. And I mean, I was in isolation for 10 months, and um, there was a reason for that, and it was amazing. But there comes a point when you have an awareness where you're like, okay, this is getting way too comfortable, not
Hmm.
interacting with people and, like isolating yourself, because isolation breeds more fear in the long run. We're not talking about recharging yourself and like going inward, and all of that is beautiful, but there's a really fine line where isolation becomes counterproductive, and that's really what we're talking about, right? To recognize that and say, okay, it's time to go back out there. It's time to expose myself to the world and people, and um, so it's yeah, it goes both ways for sure.
Mm. And also, I think if you spend a lot of time alone, like for example, I work at home in the morning and have lunch, and then I go to a private members club. So there's like kind of a co-working area. And then I realize that everyone annoys me. People on these calls, or people just don't have any respect or empathy for those around them. But then I think that's because I've spent so much time alone, because I have that luxury of doing what I want when I want in the way I want. But I think it's good to have that tolerance of others as well, because you need that if you want to have a relationship. You need to be able to tolerate someone who's very different from you, obviously within your boundaries,
Yeah,
etc. But I think it's you can't lose that
yeah.
tolerance. Mm.
So, Venus, is there something before we wrap, something that we haven't talked about that you think we should mention or that you want to share?
Well, something that's helped me shift my kind of thinking is I do every night. I have this little diary and I write my wins of the day. So my 3 wins of the day, because self-compassion is usually a low thing for us. But if you write down 3 things you did today and did well, like my first going to the gym, or I read a book, or productive day, I got a new client, things like that,
Mhm.
before bed. Because when you go to bed, then you've got this kind of more positive thinking happening in your brain, rather than didn't do that, didn't do that, didn't do that. So I think it's really important to just honor where you are, what you've achieved in the day, and yeah, take it from there.
Set the tone before you go to bed.
Mm, exactly.
Before we close, I want to leave you with this. Today's conversation wasn't about being wild or rebellious. It wasn't about chasing pleasure or turning back time. It was about coming home to yourself. Venus reminded us that self love isn't a feeling we magically arrive at, it's a practice. It's self compassion, it's boundaries, it's confidence, it's growth, and yes, it is pleasure. Not for performance and not for someone else, but as a way to reconnect your own body and your own aliveness. Especially in midlife, when we're no longer proving or reproducing, we have this powerful, beautiful opportunity to ask, who am I now? What actually feels good to me? And what would fulfillment look like from the inside out? This isn't about escapism, it's about wholeness. It's about choosing micro moments of alignment every single day in how you treat your body, how you show up, how you protect your peace, and how you honor your desires. If something shifted for you while listening, pay attention to that, because that's not noise. That's your awareness. And awareness is where joy begins. Venus, thank you for this conversation. I love that we were able to have this conversation in a way that's really honest, grounded, and not sensational, I want to say. Because this isn't about being rebellious or being wild. It's about being whole, really. And I know there are women listening right now who feel something shift, maybe in how they relate to their own bodies, maybe in how they define pleasure for themselves, and maybe how they define self-love. And that really matters. I am really grateful you're here. Thank you so much, Venus.